Hi, my name is Tucker. On this video today, we have a few different parties all involved in the buying and selling of companies. One of them being Kathy with Lone Star Design Build. She worked with IAG M&A Advisors. We have Jason and Paula, both with IAG, on this video today, as well as Doug Howard with Growth Team Strategies to approach a process that allowed her to sell her company at a higher valuation than what was initially presented. I would like to start with a little bit of an introduction with Kathy. Kathy, how long have you had your business Lone Star Design Build before you decided to exit that business?
I started it in 2007, so it was a full 15 years before I sold it.
Okay. And you started that business yourself, I'm assuming?
Yes, well, with my husband, I did. Started a business with my husband and myself.
Great. And what made you start thinking about selling that business?
Well, from day one, I always wanted to sell the business, and I just was always working towards that. Went to seminars and read books on selling the business, but I really had no idea on how to value the business or what it should sell for.
Okay. So you started the business with the intention of selling it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and selling it for the reason of retirement, other opportunities, or just because?
I think just because of the achievement, it's another goal, but it certainly was good for retirement.
Okay. Whenever you first started thinking about selling your company, kind of walk me through what process maybe you looked at doing. Were you Google searching? Did you have some friends that knew some other companies that could help you sell? In other words, how did you get in touch with IAG?
Well, that was pretty much after I was already looking at opportunities to sell. I went to seminars in Dallas, wasn't anywhere near ready. It was probably right after the recession, and was getting ideas on what it took to sell a business. And then IAG did have a call center, or does have a call center, and reached out to me. And so I was interested in it and met with one of the representatives and got an idea of what it would take to prepare to sell the business. But that was in 2017 and wasn't ready to sell the business at that point.
Okay. So in 2017, IAG got in touch with you, talked to you about selling your business. Mm-hmm. You were already interested in selling your business. So that kind of maybe an interesting opportunity that was presented to you. Mm-hmm. What was next in that process? Did you sign up with IAG then, or kind of what happened after that point?
Well, I did. I had the valuation done, and that's when I realized that it wasn't that I wasn't ready to sell in 2017, nor having the amount of sale for the business. So it was really after that I kind of put it on hold and revisited in 2019, and then in 2020 was ready to sell. But in the meantime, I did look at some other brokerage firms and was kind of comparing kind of after the fact, because I'd already started and paid the fee for IAG. But then I realized that IAG had more of the potential that I thought I needed. One was a franchise business broker. Another one was a individual company in Fort Worth. And although they both had contacts, I didn't know if they would have the breadth of contacts that I needed. Or the
expertise. That makes sense. So would you say IAG was one of the more experienced firms that you might have come across and spoken with?
Yeah, I felt more confident with IAG that they would be able to take the business and sell. In the remodeling industry, there's this thinking that remodeling companies don't sell. I know there's more that are selling now, but when I first started with the business, there really wasn't happening. So I thought I needed some brokerage firm that would be strong enough to be able to take me through that.
Okay. What do you think matters the most to you, or mattered the most to you, with all of the brokerage firms that you talked to? What was it, the experience that IAG had, or were there more things that kind of drew you into that process and felt that you could trust IAG a little bit more than maybe some other firms?
Yeah, I think it seemed like it had a broader spread and more contacts, more experienced brokers. Although really when I met Paula is when I was very comfortable working with IAG. There were a couple other brokers I met before that we just didn't really click. So part of it's a representative, part of it's the the expertise of the company.
Okay. So Paula, who's also on this video with us today, you met Paula and you guys, I guess, hit it off. And Paula has a lot of experience in selling companies as well as many relationships with buyers. Paula, what do you think made the synergy click with Lone Star?
Well, I think what's most important when you're working with a client is to be honest and upfront. So I was always willing to share, the good news with Kathy and some of the not so good news as well. You know, we'd be honest about what some of the strengths were in her company, some of the things that we needed to work on. But what made that easy was Kathy's receptivity. She was very willing to work with us on those things that we needed to do. She was really terrific in providing the information that we needed to best represent her company. So she made it easy.
Great. Kathy, so I know a part of the process for working with IAG and with a lot of M&A advisors actually is first getting a valuation so you can understand maybe the difference between an asking price and what your company might be worth in the perspective of buyers today. Was that a part of the initial process that you were engaged with?
Right. The valuation was completed in 2017, and then I also met with those representatives to walk through the multi-page document. A lot of it I didn't really understand, and so it took some time for me to really get my head wrapped around selling a business and the terms and how long it was going to take and what I needed to do to get ready to improve my business.
Okay. Were you somewhat surprised maybe with what you thought your business might be valued at versus what a valuation firm came back with?
No, I didn't really have a clue because I also had that thinking that remodeling companies didn't sell. But when I did see it, I realized I either had to work more years or not get what it was that I wanted for the business. So I was already involved with organizations and coaching to help me improve my business. And there was a lot of, I guess, the support from Doug and the remodeling association I belong to that really helped me put the processes in place.
Okay. So you mentioned Doug. Doug's here with Growth Team Strategies. He works with business owners to help them grow into a higher valuation and exit their business maybe at a level that they didn't think might have been possible before. How did you and Doug get connected?
I was part of Remodelers Advantage, which is a national organization that supports remodeling companies. And you have to have a certain revenue in order to even belong to that organization. And so Doug and I guess I started a little bit before Doug, but then he and I met during one of his initial meetings. And we pretty much hit it off, and it was easy to work with Doug. And so that I had asked to hire him as a coach. And then he was also a facilitator with some of our peer groups.
Doug, when you first met Kathy, what were some of the things about Lone Star Design Build that made you want to work with that business to get her a higher value and ultimately sell her company?
Well, I think probably the biggest thing was Kathy was very focused on what she wanted her outcome to be. She was very committed to doing things that she needed to do to make changes, which was apparent by her seeking out the peer group and taking advice from them and really, I think fully exploring beyond what the initial reaction, like you said, was, can you sell a remodeling company? What's the valuation right now? And so the conversation really became more about, well, what needs to be true to get, out of this what you want to get out of it. And I think it was really more her commitment and, capabilities to do that was probably the most appealing part of working together.
Okay. What are some of the aspects of working with a business like Kathy's that you help with to increase the value of the businesses?
I think the biggest thing is really just a very good understanding of the numbers, but not only where they are right this minute, but where you need them to be. So we started with a 3-year plan, really looking at what would the balance sheet need to look like? What would the profit need to look like? What would, for the numbers to justify, the goals that she had for selling the business. And then I think it's a lot easier to work backwards from there. You can start to look at what the differential is, what things need to move, and then, to draw on some of the best practices out there so we don't have to reinvent the wheel to say, okay, well, if that's what we're trying to accomplish, we need a process for this, or we need to change, how this ratio looks, or whatever it might be. And then hopefully the business owner has the time and the commitment to act on that. And Kathy did a phenomenal job with that.
Okay. What would you say that most business owners that you work with, maybe there's a gap between what they think their business is worth and what it might actually be worth from the moment that you start talking to them?
Yeah, for many, although it seems to go in two different directions, right? It's either they've thought about selling, they've done a little work, and they think it should be worth a lot more, or particularly with service businesses, they've not contemplated that there is a value to the business, and they're maybe just thinking they're going to work their last project, and that's going to be the end of, the business. It'll just wind down. So, the first step is believing it's sellable and looking at the things that are going to make it sellable. And then the second is kind of getting those things that are looking at the valuation and the potential sale price to line up,
Okay. And what are some of the most important things that maybe you and Kathy worked on that actually drove a higher value for her company?
Well, I think, Kathy had a relatively small company in terms of number of people, right? So a big part of it was making sure that the processes were documented. There was a way of doing business, because that was, I think, really important. She also did a lot of work on the sales process and creating an active pipeline that, I think when someone could look at it and see that there was going to be a continuation of revenue or an expectation there, that was a big deal. Profit margin is always a big deal. What are we getting out of the projects that we're working on? So those are probably some of the biggest things, I would think. Okay.
And what do you think is, I know a lot of business owners would ask this question of as far as timeline goes. What do you think is a reasonable timeline to make changes like what you just mentioned in a business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's probably maybe 18 to 24 months. We always try to look at a window if someone hasn't even started the process of about 5 years, and it's because it's going to take a little time to make changes, and then you want that window of time where you can see those changes showing up in several years of financial statements. I know Paula talked a lot about consistency of numbers, right? Seeing some consistency, reasonable expectations of a buyer. So, if you want that window of time and you have to make some improvements to get there, that's probably about the right time frame. Could be a little longer, but if you don't have that much time frame, and there are things you can do fairly quickly to make it, at least move things in the right direction.
Okay. And that's why you're calling your process 5 years to go.
Yeah. I mean, we have a lot of people that have less than 5 years to go, right? And so we take elements of that, we move it along at the pace that we can. But ideally, if someone's sitting out there saying, hey, in 5 or 6 years, this is what I'd like to be in position to do, it's not too early to be thinking about it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. How do you think maybe business owners, I know a lot of business owners would question the economy right now.
Sure.
There's a lot of craziness, especially in the last 3 years. There's a lot of changes that have happened in the economy, and there's still a lot of relative uncertainty about the future. Are there things that maybe you would recommend that an owner could do to protect the value of their business, maybe in the wake of economic uncertainties?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some consistent things that companies do that have gotten them through the rough times, I think. Some of that is really how they shore up their dedicated source of leads. A big part, especially in certain service businesses, the more you can define the sector you're in, who your ideal customer is, not trying to be all things to all people, and really identify who's going to be spending money even if things slow down a little bit. That can give you a real decided edge. Protecting profit margins by making sure that you're really focused on the value of what you provide, right? If things get tight and we're really all about price, there's going to be a lot of volatility there. When we're looking at the value of something, people generally will still pay for value. There may be fewer of them out there, but so I think that's a big part of it. cost control is a big thing. Keeping overhead at a level that you need to provide a good service, but we really consistently look for things where we can economize and reshop expenses and those types of things. A consistent sales process, and right now the biggest thing is really just honing your sales skills. A lot of people are seeing a little bit of a slowdown, a little harder to make sales right now, and my feeling is if it's going to be harder to make sales, then we got to get better at making sales. We don't want less sales, right? We just may need to work a little harder to stay in the range that we want to stay in. And then in any economy, you got to really understand your local market. Right now, the economic things that are going on out there are very geography specific. So that's important. And understanding in a given market who's spending money, where the money's coming from. So,
absolutely. And that's all not only really great advice, but things that 5 years to go helps business owners with in the process, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So, Kathy, this was a big transformation you went through, a big process that you went through. What were some of the things that you enjoyed about working with Doug?
Well, I really felt very confident working with Paula. And so we took whatever issues we had, like I was the face of the company and I was going to be gone and I held a lot of responsibility. So how do we deal with that and still sell the business? Because I didn't have the time to go and hire a salesperson or a general manager. I was ready. So I think working with Paula, I had a lot of confidence in her helping me through all of it. And we had some tough times. We put it on right when COVID hit. And so 2020 was a tough year. And so when you talk about what's the right time to sell, I always think when you're ready to sell is the right time to sell. And if I can put it on in April of 20 and still sell the business, I mean, that says a lot. So we just kind of had to plot through it. But I think the support of IAG and we were brainstorming what can we do to get more people to take a look at us or what was happening during 2020 to keep the business viable to sell.
Great. And how did working with Doug help you achieve a higher valuation than maybe was initially presented to you?
Well, we started with that 3-year plan that Doug mentioned, and it was really taking a hard look at all the different areas. We're looking at staffing, marketing, sales, financials. What was I going to do over those 3 years to help get the business ready to sell? So I think that was the support, and I could lean on Doug throughout the process. And he and I did a lot of brainstorming when things kind of slowed down and we needed to kind of see what else could we do to move the business along.
Yeah, it sounds like it was a team effort, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. It was.
Are you satisfied with the overall result? I mean, it's selling your business. I think a lot of people they misunderstand the process. They think that maybe they just list their business for sale and then somebody makes an offer, and they don't realize that it does take a village to sell a business sometimes, mm-hmm. and it's quite a process. And so start to finish, are you satisfied with where you're at today versus mm-hmm. where you were in 2017?
Oh, certainly. I mean, as you're asking the question, I'm thinking about all the little loopholes that Paula and I had to go through in different potential candidates who wanted to buy who really weren't good candidates, and how do you deal with it? I didn't even know what questions to ask potential buyers. So there was a real learning curve throughout the whole time frame. And when it came down to choosing a buyer, there were 2 opportunities that came up within 24 hours. So at that time, I think all the time beforehand really helped prepare me to be able to walk through the final stages of selling it with the buyer.
Okay, great. And are there things that you wish that you would have known in the beginning that you learned throughout the process that maybe somebody else looking to sell their company should be looking out for, or maybe things that you would tell them that they could do better, or who to hire, or kind of what situation they can walk through?
That's a good question, because you don't know what you don't know, and I guess it would be nice to know all that. I mean, if I was to sell business now, it'd be a whole lot easier because I have already walked through it. So I don't really know that there's anything to really tell somebody, because you really just have to get familiar with the terms, the process, what you have to do. And like Paula said, you're going to have to be ready to prepare information when the buyer is there. And I because of Remodeler's Advantage and working with Doug, I was very up on my financials. I had them all prepared, and so all I had to do was just click a button and send them over. But I understand that a lot of people may not have done that, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult.
Tucker, one of the things I think that Paula really guided Kathy on, and Kathy did really well, was really understanding you have to work on this stuff all the way up to the finish line, right? That these deals aren't done until they're done. And, you know, sometimes when people get close or you have something in the works, it might be a little easier to take your eye off the marketing or the process, or, you know, and I just think that notion of you really have to run the business all the way through the transaction is something that it's important for everybody to be prepared for. Because we had a couple of, you know, iterations where we were close on the deal, and then dates moved and banks changed, and just things that happen when you get close to the end of a deal, and everybody keeping a cool head and kind of just continuing to work the process, to me is a big reason why it got over the finish line.
And I would say that's great advice and a great point to make. I would estimate that having somebody like Doug and also IAG on board through that process to introduce to new banks, you know, if one falls through, also to keep the business seller motivated, to keep the business owner moving throughout the process. I know from my own research, they say 85% of deals are lost in diligence, and diligence is a very lengthy, sometimes scrutinizing process, and it's always great to have professionals on board to help with that too. I know, Paula, you guys at IAG do a wonderful job throughout diligence, and I'm sure working with Doug helped that as well, because not only was it not a mess of things to sort through, but I'm sure Kathy, working with Doug, had things prepared for diligence, and I'm sure that made the process a lot easier.
Yeah, there's no question of that. And as Kathy said, your financials have to be in really good shape, because that's absolutely critical as you're going through the process. The bank is going to be looking for that information if the buyer is going to be getting a loan. The buyer needs that information during due diligence. So it's important to be prepared with financials that are in really good shape. If you have some questions that the buyer asks and takes a look at the financials, and there's inconsistent information in the financials, that can squirrel the whole deal. So being tight with all of the data with respect to the business is really important when you go through that process. And again, Kathy was really zipped up on all of that.
That's great.
Also, that is because of the training that I had and working with Doug in preparing that, because I didn't even really understand the depth of the financials and being able to compare or what needs to be in what category at the very beginning. So it was really a learning process on that too.
And I think, Tucker, one of the things that helped also is, you know, one of the things I was impressed with IAG was that the company, and Paula in particular, was just very open to input. You know, things that are specific to the industry, ideas that we had about, you know, where a buyer might come from, or just things that might be appealing, or just things going on specifically in the industry at that moment. You know, that kind of collaboration, I think, helped things evolve too. And you know, that's I think a really important part in having a partner managing the process, you know, like IAG did.
Absolutely. Yeah, and this is all really great points, really great information. I think it will help a lot of business owners that are looking to sell understand that maybe there's a lot more to the process than what they originally thought, and also that maybe what they think their business might be worth might not be what somebody is willing to pay for it, which is why it's really great to get the right people on board. Do your research, do your homework, but at the same time, hire people that have experience selling businesses, as well as have experience growing businesses, so that, as Doug put it, you can keep running your business and then let the professionals that do this for a living handle the rest.